Welcome to Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and willing to share their wisdom with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with the Latina perspective. This is season 2, focused on health and wellness. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Hey, today's episode is packed with so much information, like for real. I talked with Dr. Angie a few weeks ago and I couldn't wait to get her episode out into the world. She is a pediatric chiropractor and is helping so many families and educating people on chiropractic care as an option for stress and anxiety by taking a look at our nervous system and finding ways to heal it in a more natural and holistic way. The whole episode, I was in awe of learning about chiropractic care and how she's bringing more representation and awareness to the Latinx communities. Hello. I am so excited for our next guest. I have Dr. Angie here, and we have known each other virtually, I think. I don't know if we've ever met in person, but we connected through the network Chicago Latina Moms, which I talk about pretty often on here. And then we also have a mutual friend, Jasmine Lopez. And she was both the founder of Chicago Latina Moms and Jasmine Lopez were on the first season of this podcast, episodes 3 and 4. But I'm excited to chat with you. I feel like this is going to be a really important topic, especially as we're talking about health and wellness. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell me about who you are.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited. This is definitely my first podcast, so just throwing that out there. I might be a little nervous, but I am Dr. Angie Recendez. I am a pediatric and prenatal chiropractor, so I have focused my practice on seeing mainly kids and pregnant women and families, and so I am a first-generation Latina. I'm a mother. I'm a wife. I'm a business owner, entrepreneur, all the things, and doing it. So super excited, and thank you for having me.
Yes, and I know that you just had a baby, right?
I did. I have a 2-year-old who just turned 2, and then a little baby who's now 4 months, almost 5 months. I can't believe it. It goes by so fast.
Oh my goodness, it really does. I enjoy watching and following along on social media because your kids are just so cute.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well, why don't you walk us through your story, like your background, like what brought you to chiropractic work?
Yeah, well, thanks so much again. So a little bit about me. When I grew up, I just like a traditional Latina household. Every time you get sick, te llevan al doctor. The doctor gives you a medication. He gives you something for your cold or cough. And to me, that seemed to happen once a month or once every other month. And I didn't realize that was abnormal. I just thought that was normal because that was my life. I used an inhaler. I used to play soccer and I needed an inhaler. Every time I had a soccer game or every time we had gym, I had to always have it on hand. And it wasn't until I turned 18 years of age when I was working for a chiropractor that I got my first adjustment. And then 8 months later, he was asking me how it was going. And I was like, it's been 8 months and I haven't gotten sick. And that was the first time in all of my life that I had gone that long. And 8 months doesn't seem like a long time to some people. But for me, it was that without getting sick. And I was playing soccer and I realized that I wasn't really needing my inhaler or using my inhaler. So that's what changed my path from wanting to be a dentist at the time to wanting to be a chiropractor. And then I knew I wanted to focus on kids. And the reason was because I feel like if my mom knew that chiropractic care was an option, she would have chosen it for me. She would have chosen it for me at a much younger age. That would have made a difference for my health or the health or my siblings' health. And then recently, 2 years ago, I mentioned my first daughter is 2 years old. And we had a stressful pregnancy because I was opening up my office in Arlington Heights. I did go through IVF with her. And if any moms out there have ever gone through IVF, it's pretty stressful. Even when you do finally get pregnant, it's stressful because you've worked so hard to get pregnant that everything stresses you out at that stage. And knowing what I know now as a birth worker, as a pediatric chiropractor, like those things play a role and a part into the growth of my child that was inside of me. But my daughter, due to preeclampsia, we had to get induced at 32 weeks gestation. She was born at 3 pounds, 5 ounces. She spent a month in the NICU. And again, knowing what I know it was stressful, but I'm thankful for medicine for saving not only her life, but my life, because that's how preeclampsia goes. But again, chiropractic for giving her life. And now she's 2 years old. She got sick for the second time a couple months ago. She's eating, walking. And for a lot of kids that are born that little, there's some delays or some milestone delays or asthma, allergies, all those kind of things. And I'm thankful for chiropractic. And so to me, that reignited my passion for pediatric chiropractic care, because now, especially with the pandemic and all the stress that women are encountering who are pregnant, but other families who have had similar experiences as mine, have kiddos with different ailments that we can talk about later, kind of what those are, examples of what they are. It reignited my passion to allow them to know that, hey, chiropractic care is available. It's available for pediatric population, for kiddos as early as newborns to as teenagers, toddlers, and adults, and how it can help really thrive or enhance their family's health and family's life to have more good days and bad days, really.
I didn't realize you can do chiropractic work on babies or like infants.
Yeah. So I adjusted my daughter when she was, I think, 3 hours born. And our doula was Isabel from Chicago Latina Moms. And so she was our doula for both. And I think it was 3 hours later for that I adjusted my daughter. And then for Leo, it was about an hour afterwards. And so the adjustments are super light. So being born is, I mean, if you think about it, it's a little physically stressful and traumatic. You have the uterus pushing you down from your hips. You're coming out of a small opening. You're navigating the birth canal. And that's for a vaginal delivery. If it's a C-section delivery, they're helping assist baby from their neck and pulling the baby out. And so that's the reason why pediatric chiropractic care is so important, especially at the age, because they just encountered a pretty physically stressful delivery, going from a small, cozy, warm womb and coming out to the bright lights of the universe and the world and all of these voices that they've never heard before. That's emotionally stressful for them. I like to joke sometimes where I'm like, I wonder what it would be like if I were to think of like a life event of what it would be like to be born for us as adults. I feel like it would be a whiplash injury, like when you get rear-ended from the back, where you're like, oh, you're like your head and your neck stretch and you're sore for a few days. Where for us as adults, we can communicate like, oh, me duele, I have stress and tension. Where a kiddo, they can't really communicate that. So their way of communicating would be colicky, fussy, reflexy, constipated babies. And so for them, those are those signs that, hey, I just endured what would be like a car accident for us. And that's how those signs show up for them, that their nervous systems have a little bit of stress in their nervous system from the birth process, or even from pregnancy, and how that shows up for them as little babies. And I know a lot of time parents are told that it's normal, they'll grow out of it. But for us in our office, it's definitely common, but it's not normal. To us, those are some of those early warning signs that something's happening in their nervous system that we can definitely help support them with.
That is so fascinating, because a lot of times we're only directed to use medicine. Like that's really the only option. So like if you have like your baby is colicky or fussy or crying, it's like, okay, what can I give them to like get the crying to stop? Really, it's not common for people to think that it might be like your body just might be in pain or just need an adjustment.
So yeah, I would definitely say we hear it a lot, especially with like moms crying on the phone. They're desperate. They don't know what else to do. And as a mom of a colicky fussy baby, which Maddie was, because she was born so early, she was fussy, and you don't know what to do as a mom. And the other part of that is that you struggle to connect with your baby. Like all you want during that time is to nurture, hug, love on your baby. And if he's crying, you've tried everything, the three things that they tell you to do: feed them, change their diaper, soothe them, and none of that is working. It can add to the postpartum depression or the postpartum stress and anxiety, because you're like, this should not happen this way. This isn't the way the movies have told me this phase of life is going to be like. But then when you go get help, people will tell you like they'll grow out of it. It's fine. Let them cry it out. Go to another room. Like the things that I've heard parents say, or some parents will try to change the formula, change the diet. Other parents will try medication, the grape water, all these different things to try to get baby to soothe and be calm down. But for us in our office, we do scans to give us objective measures to see, where is this kiddo? Where is this baby? Are they stuck in more of that state of fight or flight, adding to the not sleeping, the reflexy, the fussiness, and what their nervous system looks like. So these scans will let us know if it shows stress on the nervous system and it's a colicky fussy baby. Then we're like, hey, let's do these light adjustments, getting this baby into more of this calm state, because they were just born. That's stressful. And getting their nervous system to just calm down.
So typically, how young do people contact you for like when they are around, like getting desperate and saying like, I don't know what else to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's an array. So if it is a baby, a fussy baby, it'll be a mom who's typically after the first month, after the second month of age. But a lot of a lot of our kiddos it's the either really early or probably around the age 2 to 6. And age 2 to 6 are the kiddos that haven't met milestones, have some speech delays, some motor delays, and many of those times those are kiddos that are already in different therapies, but they want their kiddos to excel, to go faster through those therapies, to get to a different place, or they're acknowledging and noticing that, especially now with the pandemic, that there's more emotional stress in their lives, that they're like, hey, my kiddo is really struggling. Or the parent who has had to sit with their kid for days on end doing e-learning, and they're realizing my kid really does struggle to sit still. They struggle to focus. I catch them when I walk past the room that they're looking up into different directions. And so they're realizing that the kiddo really does struggle a little bit more in school and academics than maybe they realize, because the teacher can't send you a note every day to say, your kid can't sit still again, your kid can't sit still again. And that becomes repetitive. And so the parents have come to us to say, hey, I think there's something happening. I don't want to medicate my kid to get them to calm down, but I want to see if chiropractic care can help. Is there any stress along their nervous system? Are they stuck in fight or flight? Are their muscles sending too much input into their brain? And so that's one of the things that we talk about a lot in the office. If you close your eyes and touch your nose, the reason you can do that is because there's muscles along your arms, muscles along every joint along your arm to send your brain information to tell you where you're at in space. It's the reason you can close your eyes and not tip over. It's because of these muscles sending those messages to your brain. And so for kiddos that have had a stressful pregnancy, stressful birth, lots of slips and falls, this information that gets sent to the brain, it's called, fancy word is proprioception, but this information can be really loud. So it essentially helps answer to the parent, is my son or daughter sitting in the front row of a Metallica concert when I'm asking, or a Tamborazo concert, and when you're asking them to sit still, pay attention, and focus. It's not that they don't want to, that they can't, or that they're being defiant many times, but it's that this input is so loud that they physiologically, they cannot. And so one of the scans that we do really helps answer that parent, like, hey, this is happening. This is what we can do about it. There's other ways. Obviously, you can use medication. You can use these other alternatives, but also chiropractic care can help quiet that down, and we can measure it get quiet over time. And the parents also see it at home. They're like, oh my gosh, yeah, they can focus longer. They're making eye contact with me. They're actually having a conversation with me. So those are super, super cool. So it's really like two sectors. To answer back your question, it's two groups of parents. It's the ones that who are super young, who are struggling at home, and they're like, this shouldn't be this way. This is my second kid. My first one was so much easier. Or the other common thing that I hear is like, oh, I got a lucky baby or an unlucky baby. It's like, no, the universe didn't make you unlucky. You just have a fussy baby. Like, let me see if there's anything I can do to help. Because right now it's showing up as colicky and fussiness, but when it it doesn't go away. It goes away for their age group. Now it's showing up as infections. Now it's showing up as respiratory infections. Now it's showing up as motor and speech delays. Now it's showing up as anxiety and these different conditions for their different age groups. And so that's the one group. The second group are a little bit older when they're noticing these other things with the stress. And then I would say the third group is really parents who are like, hey, I have a generally healthy child, but I want to see if there's anything else I can do to help support their nervous system, help support their immune system to thrive through life.
That's so interesting. I think, and I was just going to ask, like, can someone come in and get a scan, or would you recommend them getting a scan if they don't see any, like, of the speech delays or like colic or any of those ailments?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in our country or world, I don't know, society, we misunderstand what health is. A lot of times, health is like an absence of symptoms or conditions. And it's like, is that really healthy? Like, if I eat a cheeseburger every day and pop every day, but I look healthy and I'm like, is that really health? And so having these objective measures to take a look and see, like, hey, I'm really stuck in fight or flight, but I've learned techniques over time to calm me down. And it's like, hey, well, did you learn those techniques? Need to learn those techniques to keep you in that state of calm? Or can we calm your nervous system down so you don't need to use those techniques as much, if that makes sense? And so getting scan will let us know from these different areas, is there anything that we can do? So for example, sometimes it's the parent, it was just yesterday that the parent was like, oh, I give them a fiber gummy every day. There's no constipation issues. And I was like, well, why did you have to do the fiber gummies in the first place? Is there something happening? And most of the time it is. And so now that's an absence of that condition, but is there something that could be done internally so that you don't need to use it as often, because that's the reason why you were using it or added it to their lifestyle.
Man, you're making me think. and, and I'm like, I feel like I haven't seen any of those things in my kids, but I feel like after this year of being in a pandemic, like I'm sure it has affected them, and they, like, kids are resilient, but it's like everything affects us, whether we're a kid or an adult. And like as adults, we have been affected by this pandemic. Like everyone has. And so while I can't see like any outward things that have affected my kids, or like we have the privilege, like I'm home with them, so if there's any anxiety, like we can talk about it and talk through it right away. But I wonder what is going on in their bodies, and I'm gonna have to come in for a scan for them,
Oh, yeah.
just because I
Just
am
to take a
curious.
look. And just to
Yeah.
take a look. I mean, I encourage parents to do that, because if you don't know, you can't make an informed choice. And so just having that data, having that information, and while chiropractic may be an option for you, but it might be like, hey, kiddo's doing fairly well, but there's just these few things here. Chiropractor may not be the right route, but let's find you the route that is right for you. Let's find you whether that's essential oils with jasmine, whether that's lifestyle eatings or different things like that. And so definitely with a pandemic, there's been a lot of individuals that are realizing this, but also kiddos, that emotional bucket, which is the pandemic, the stress is our buckets are full. They've never had to wear masks, and now they're seeing everyone with masks. A lot of our kiddos, especially our nonverbal kiddos, they use facial expressions for communication, and they don't have that right now. So it's definitely added to that emotional bucket where we're starting to see symptoms, or we may not be seeing symptoms. And for us as adults, when we're stressed, we're not sleeping, we're not eating well, we're gaining weight because our bodies aren't able to do what it needs to do with these nutrients. So it's packing them on. And we're able to talk about it. We go to therapy, we discuss this stress that we're having, but kiddos don't necessarily have those tools that we do as adults. One of the things that we're definitely seeing with the pandemic, obviously, we've been pregnant. I was pregnant through the pandemic, and we're more stressed. A lot of the scans that we've seen are kiddos just stuck in that state of fight or flight. So an example of fight or flight is say like you're at your house and a bear walks into the office. So your instincts to survive that situation kick in. when that threat leaves, your body's able to go back into that restored state of calm and balance. But some of our kiddos, due to stress in utero, stress in the birth process, slips and falls that they have throughout their lifetime, their nervous system stays stuck in that bear in your office and alert all the time. And so that stress has had a lot of our babies who aren't sleeping are super fussy and super colicky. I cannot tell you the amount of babies that we've had that have had their scans super fight or flight. And I'm happy that they are here in my office, but I can't imagine the amount of other babies that are out there who, or moms are stressed out, who don't know that that's happening and are equating it to just, I'm stressed, they're stressed, and that's just the way life has to be.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming to think about.
I know. It's what drives me, I would say. I'm not the best at podcasts. I'm not the best at public speaking, but it drives me to let other parents know that this is an option. Again, it brings me back to my life could have been different had my mom known. And I can't tell you the amount of times parents tell me, I wish I would have known about this earlier. And so it kind of melts my heart and it empowers me to be like, Angie, get out there, tell parents, talk to other moms, talk to other families, and allow them to understand that this is an option, that there are options, and that you as a parent have to make those choices for your kiddo. And if it's the right choice, awesome. If it's not the right choice, awesome. But just know that it's a choice.
Right. And I think that is like knowing the options that we have. Like I feel like it's my generation, millennials, the parents now with like kids that are not teens yet or like preteens that are realizing all of these options, and it's because our parents didn't have the options or they didn't know about them because they were either just trying to survive as an immigrant in the US or trying to make sure the whole family was cared for and okay. So I think it's so important to have the Latinx representation, like with you as a doctor in this specific field, to be able to educate, because I feel like that is like that education piece with chiropractic work is not necessarily very like out there in the Latino community.
I feel like there's definitely like a mainstream, the traditional thing that we learn from our parents. Like if your kiddo is sick, you go to the doctor. Like if there's something happening, you go to the doctor. And I get it. Like if Maddie had an issue, like when she was a baby at 8 months old and had her first like upper respiratory cough, I was freaking out and I was like, oh my gosh, she's struggling to breathe. I need to go to the doctor. And I did. And the provider that I go to, they empower us. They're like, hey, do this, do this, do this. If that doesn't work, then let's try this medication, because we don't want you don't want to see her struggle. We want to help serve her as well. And I think my mom, she was probably told maybe there was a language barrier as well with her provider. And it was like, hey, dale esta medicina, and she'll get better, or this antibiotic. And that's what she knew. That's what she trusted. And so for us as millennials, we have Google, we have access to research, we have the internet, and we're like, hey, this is an option, but let's see if there's any other options that can support me in a different direction. And if and have that option to be able to make that informed choice as a family. So I would say I definitely connect well with millennials because we have the same struggles. We understand how our parents are and how they were in their thinking. And then we also understand each other at that level as well, where it's like, hey, we have that ability to Google and research to be able to find those answers for us.
Right. Google, like we are so blessed by Google. It might steer us wrong in the wrong direction sometimes. True. But the access to information is great. I can't imagine life without it. So I was introduced to chiropractic work when my father was going to the chiropractor. He would go to the chiropractor before he ran marathons, and then he would go to the chiropractor afterwards, or if he was having issues during training. And so he would take me every once in a while and say like, "Oh, let's get adjusted." And especially throughout college, I was getting migraines a lot. And he's like, "Maybe you should go to the chiropractor." And so I would go, and the adjustments were pretty intense.
Yeah.
Um, I was like I always left like not knowing what just happened. I feel like there are like loud noises
Yeah.
and like you can hear your body crack
Yeah.
and it could be overwhelming for kids. So why don't you walk us through like the difference and like how you approach chiropractic work with kids?
Yeah, that's a really good question because pediatric spines, pediatric nervous systems are not miniature adult spines. They have their own biomechanics, their own neurology, especially for kiddos that are on the spectrum, sensory, neurodiverse kiddos. Their nervous systems are a little bit more delicate. And so they already have an overstimulated nervous system. You can't overstimulate it. So you really have to look for a pediatric chiropractor that is confident and knows what they're doing to be able to adjust these kiddos. And so there's different techniques and a wide array of techniques based off of what it is that that individual needs. For our babies, an adjustment to many times the parents just looks like I have my fingers around their neck or that I'm holding their little butts and that I'm holding them. But it's just these light movements and light adjustments to allow that nervous system to relieve that tension or pressure along their nervous system to allow that better flow and communication throughout their body. For kiddos who are a little bit older, sometimes we use an instrument adjustment to adjust. It's light and for kiddos, so it doesn't make any of that popping or twisting or cracking. But sometimes we do need to use a little bit more traditional techniques, and we call them popcorns. And the kiddos love them. Like, oh, I heard a popcorn. But again, it's a very light, specific adjustment that we apply. And for kiddos, less is more. Again, we don't want to overstimulate their nervous system. We really, through our scans, understand what part of where the stress is along their nervous system, what we need to do to be able to calm their system to get them to a better place. So if we can understand what's happening, not just from the symptoms, because the symptoms is just an outward expression of the nervous system on the inside not able to adapt. But when we do these scans, it lets us know what's happening on the inside and where we need to get this kiddo to in order to get them to a better place.
So the first step for someone who is wanting this for their kids is to come in to get that scan. Like, when they do come in for that first time, is it just the scan that they're getting?
Yeah, we do a 2-visit process in our office. One is that first visit, it's the consultation. It's where I gather all the information. We do the scans, those 3-part scans, and then we do a history. I want to know as early as conception, like, was this a planned pregnancy or was this an unplanned pregnancy? Was there IVF? Was there any prenatal vitamins? And if so, what kind of prenatal vitamins? I want to be able to understand where mom and dad's health was or partner, where their health was prior to conception. Because I joke all the time about how some of us will plan a whole year or 2 years for our wedding, but we don't prepare our bodies for X amount of time to be able to carry and conceive a child. But I mention it because I want to get us talking about it. I want us socially to get us talking about it and thinking about it a little bit more. But in our history, I want to be able to understand that because if you're planning for something or something is a surprise, those stress levels are a little bit different. Obviously, you're going to get to a place where that's just what it is. But those initial cortisol levels or stress levels at that time, I want to be able to understand what was that first trimester like. Were there any complications in the birth process? Not the birth process, in pregnancy? Was there any big major financial changes, any big moves, any big emotional stressors during that time? And then getting us through the birth process. Were you induced or did you go into labor on your own? How many hours were you in labor? Was there any pitocin or augmenting that was happening to make things go a lot faster, which just happens to happen a lot more in our hospitals. And as a birth provider, I'm also a doula. Again, many times it's life-saving measures, but sometimes it's to get things going faster. If you take a look at just the industry of hospitals, It's a business. And so just making sure you have a doula or someone to help support you with what your wishes are one way or another. I want to understand everything prior to the birth. And then when we were at the birth, was there any pushing? Were you on your back? Were you on your knees? What was that level or gravitational pulls that were happening through the birth process? And then when the baby was born, was there any latching challenges? Was there a favorite side and a not favorite side? Because that's telling me all these different data points to be able to understand not only what's happening right now, but what has gotten us from before to where we're at right now. Sorry. So that's phase one. And then I want them to also know what chiropractic care can do. So we'll talk about what chiropractic can do and what chiropractic care cannot do and what my goals are. My goal isn't necessarily to help you with colic, to help you with constipation, but my goal is to understand what the nervous system is doing, that it's not allowing it to adapt, and getting that nervous system to communicate better so that the body can do what it was designed to do and the way to function the way it was designed to function. And so and we know the body can heal, because if you cut yourself, you don't have to tell it what to do. You don't have to do anything. It just heals. And knows it grew a baby, a human, from a sperm and an egg. Like, your body knows what to do. We just need to get it to function, communicate better. Similar to like a cell phone. If you have 1 or 2 bars of signal, if you're talking to a family member or a friend and you have 1 or 2 bars of signal, you said everything. You're like the brain, and then they are the body. They might have not gotten the message that you needed them to get to poop. And so if you have 4 or 5 bars of signal, you're the brain, and you're like, hey, release, expand, let all this go. If you have 4 or 5 hours signal, the digestive system is going to do that. And so our goal is that in that first visit, that parent really understands that's the nervous system, stress, and the 3 types of stressors, and how that can lower those bars of signal to get symptoms, or what parents sometimes bring their kiddos in to show up. So that's the first visit, empowering them to understand what we can do, so that they can make that informed decision on that second visit. So on the second visit is really where we answer 4 main questions, which is what's wrong, can we help, how long is it going to take, and then the financial portions of that and what it's going to take us, what we're looking at, what they're going to see, what the side effects can be. And usually the side effects are that they sleep more that day, they poop a lot that day, and that they thrive and they're happy and they're adaptive in those first few days, which is kind of exciting. I like those side effects. I'll take those side effects any day. So that's a 2-visit process. And then we just, if they're ready to start with care, awesome. If they're not ready to start with care, awesome. They're more informed and educated on what's happening inside. And if we need to refer them to someone else, then we do that.
My mind is blown as to how much information and like how extensive your questioning is and how that can affect the child after it's born. Like asking the financial part, like if there were any financial changes during pregnancy, or like if it was planned or a surprise. Like those are things that people don't even think about, or like at least I don't even think about being a factor in my child's health now.
Yeah. And I know like a lot of times, like we have abuelitas that were like, don't stress out because it'll affect the baby. But then the next generation of like our parents were like, it'll be fine, but you have to work and you have to provide and you have to put food on the table. Like that's not even, I asked my mom the other day, I was like, Ma, like when we were little, did you like pump? She worked at a factory. She's like, no, they didn't give us pumping breaks. I was like, so like what? And so you weren't empowered at that time. You just, you had to work. And so, sorry, going back, jumping around. So our abuelitas were like, don't stress out. Like it'll affect the baby. And then the next generation didn't really believe it. And then I feel like now I'm like, hey, yeah, it is. It's a factor. Their nervous system is the first system that develops. And if we produce cortisol, it travels in our bloodstream, and mom and baby share the same bloodstream. And science tells us that when there is stress or cortisol in the bloodstream, it developmentally changes the way their brains are forming. So we get more blood flow to the hindbrain when our kiddos are stressed. So that sends more blood flow to their skeletal muscle. So those biceps that allow us to move, run, walk. And so sometimes at birth, we'll hear moms that say like, oh, my baby was holding their head up really high. And to a parent, you're like, oh my gosh, my kiddo is so strong. And I totally get it. However, as a pediatric chiropractor, I'm like, oh, that might have been a little bit more cortisol in pregnancy that we may or may not have realized, adding more of that developmental changes. And so those are some of the things, there are little things that I hear through the history that helps me put their whole case together to be able like, hey, here's this individualized care plan specific to your kiddo based off of where he's been, where he's at now, and then where we can go in the future.
It's so fascinating. I'm gonna have to like dive in a little deeper after our talk. But I wanted to talk about how chiropractic work can be like a whole family thing. Like and maybe you can explain it a little better. I feel like we only think about our kids. Like our kids are a priority. So we're just like, okay, if chiropractic work can help our kids, that's great. But then we also forget that as adults, we can use chiropractic work, especially if we're seeing that stress and anxiety show up in our lives, because we're just like, okay, well, we're gonna give our kids all the best treatment, the natural stuff, but we're going to continue taking Tylenol or drinking or doing all of these things that make us feel good for a little bit, but aren't treating that um, specific thing in our body. And like, how can we start thinking about this holistically? Because, like you said, our kids are watching and our kids are learning from us. And if we are saying something different than what we're like trying to instill in them, then they're going to grow up thinking that they cannot take care of themselves and they're going to only have to focus on their kids. So, how can you bring in like this chiropractic work to be more of a holistic, like family care?
Yeah, we always tell our parents, and most parents are stressed. Like, it's just a thing. We even joke about it. There's memes all over about us stressed out moms, stressed out dads, stressed out parents. So we always talk about how you can't fill another cup from an empty cup. Like, you need to take care of yourselves, whether that's chiropractic care, and might be biased, but I think it's really good and effective. Whether that means taking 30, 45 minutes to yourselves on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, whatever that means to you. But in the sense of chiropractic care, a lot of our parents are stressed. A lot of our special need parents are stressed. A lot of our parents, newborn parents, are stressed because they're not sleeping. And so, going back to the scans that we use for us, we want to understand where your nervous system is at. And so our parents are all either stuck in stress or their nervous system has been there for such a long time that now it's actually in a state of exhaustion, which then we're like, hey, we need to do something. Chiropractic care is going to help us get to a place, but you need to do the things at home too to help support you doing the self-care. And it's not selfish, it's needed because again, we can't fill from an empty cup. Like our kiddos aren't going to be able to thrive as much as we can. And so when we get, usually kiddos are the place where we start, because then that relieves a lot of the stress. If their kiddos are thriving in school, they're doing better in school, the parent is less stressed, but we still need to undo stress that they've had from when they started mommyhood, when they started daddyhood, or even from their own birth process. And so a lot of times as an adult, we don't think about like, hey, these migraines that I've been having, like they started in college, they started in high school, but really it's been small stressors added over time that started in their own birth. And so for our adults, we don't go as far back as like, what was your mom's pregnancy like? What was the birth process like? But acknowledging that a lot of what we see as an adult really does start in that birth process, really does start very early on, and slips and falls that have happened throughout our lifetime, where now we have a different emotional stressors, different physical stressors, and different chemical stressors that add to the stress that we are seeing and perceiving now. And so, again, we go back to our scans to be like, hey, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I can help. Because again, someone can come in for migraines, but some mom could come in with like digestive issues, but they could have the same amount of stress in their nervous system. And so that's just that outward expression of what their body is doing to adapt with the stress that their body has encountered.
Hmm. I'm like trying to think back on my life and trying to like, oh my goodness, I could definitely use like just even thinking through and talking through past experiences, I feel like is so beneficial. Um
I mean, even going through, yeah, even going through like a lot of people believe in past generational stress. And so if you think about it right now, when my daughter was creating eggs and ovaries when she was inside of me, and so the pregnancy that I had can potentially affect the child that she has. And so there's different studies and thoughts of process and theories that that generational changes and stressors that happen. I mean, and almost, you can almost think about it in the sense of like why certain ethnicities have different common ailments. And I think it's more of that transgenerational stress over time that we were given with. And so it's our responsibility now that if we don't change these lifestyles that we currently live, how are we going to change our kiddos' life? And obviously, we love our kids and we want their kids and our grandkids to live a better life. But if we don't start making those changes in our lifestyle now so that our kids continue those different better lifestyles and healthier lifestyles, then how are we going to make those changes for our future generations?
Exactly. And I like how you talk about this care as like putting together a plan too, because I feel like sometimes people think that you just go to the chiropractor once, get adjusted, and then you're fine.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not like medicine. I wish it
yeah,
was like super fast and we can get people to a much better place overnight. But it's not like if you have a headache or migraine, you take an ibuprofen, it goes away. But again, even that, it's just turning off the signals. You still have the migraine and headache. It's just your brain can't perceive that that's happening. And so we're essentially undoing things that have happened way before that individual came to our office or our care. And so and healing takes time. Like if you cut yourself, it doesn't heal in 5 seconds. It takes time to heal. And the same thing happens with the rest of our body. Our body needs time to heal. So it's not like one adjustment and everything is done. It's a course of care that's customized to that individual based off of what that individual needs. And again, because each visit builds on each visit to get us to a better place. And so we have a big sign in our office, which I'm in right now, and it says expect miracles. And a miracle to each family can mean something different. Like a miracle could mean like, hey, my kiddo is 8 and we're taking a vacation for our first time. I didn't think I could take a vacation because my kiddo can't sit still, can't focus, and that sort of thing. Miracle could mean to a new mom, like, hey, my kid just slept through the night. A miracle could mean like, hey, my kid has been on Miralax for a whole year because they're not pooping, and they just went a whole week and they're pooping every day. We really should get a poop emoji around here because I feel like that's a big thing. And just recently, a mom did a testimonial for us, and her kiddo is about 6, and he was nonverbal when he first started with us, and now this kiddo is reading. He was reading in our office, and I remember I looked at the mom and I was like, wait a minute, did I just hear him read that? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, OMG. But that is a miracle to me. But the miracle that it was to his mom is that he said, Mommy, I love you. Like, how cool is that? And it happens all the time in our office where I almost sometimes dismiss it because I'm like, wow, yeah, it happened again. This is so cool. But it's just when you really stop to think about like what happens in the office and the 4 walls of our office, it like fills my heart every day. It fills my cup to keep pushing forward and allow more parents to hear about what it is that we do. Because just that, like, Mom, I love you. Like, I can't imagine. I can't relate, but that mom was in tears and like, that's huge. That's huge.
yeah, for sure. And I feel like it is that much more important to have the Latino representation because I feel like we hear it all the time. Like representation matters. But to have someone in this line of work, I feel like whenever I go to a doctor or see a therapist, I feel more comfortable opening up and being that much more honest if that person, like, I feel like that person can relate to my past experiences and won't judge me if I say like, oh, my mom used to do this, or we used to eat this stuff for dinner every night, or we used to have ice cream paletas every night. Like, I feel like they would not, like, they would understand that that's a cultural thing and kind of meet me where I'm at without that shame. um, so I feel like it is huge to have that representation. So I'm so glad that you are doing this line of work. And it's also like helpful to be bilingual in in any like medical practice, I feel like.
It is because there's definitely a language barrier. Even if, like, I mean, my mom, I'm sure there was a language barrier. Like, I remember translating for her. Like, I remember translating important government documents for my mom, and I was like 7 or 8, like just learning to read. And I feel like a lot of people relate to that because that was your story as well. And so just being able to communicate and at a different level where you're like, hey, I get exactly what you're saying. Or sometimes like when people say rumas and like it's hard to translate something from Spanish to English, sometimes like I know what you're talking about. Although I would say it hasn't always been easy. And just being in this field, being a professional, being a chiropractor, a Latina chiropractor, because um, I've always been the minority at this level of education, at this level of business, and so being a minority in chiropractic college was rough because it was like, hey, like, how do you take this to the masses of the Latino community? Like, someone guide me. Like, uh, what did you do? What didn't you? And it was like, it was hard to find a Latino chiropractor unless they were in Mexico, and so that was a tough and a challenge. But then, like a recent graduate going to networking events, trying to grow your business, like that was hard. But not only because you're a minority Latina, but because you're a woman and woman in business. And so I would say that's been a struggle and a learning experience in itself. And almost trying to like deal and go through like that imposter syndrome. Like, do I really belong here? Like, should I be here? Should I not be here? Do I really belong in this field, or am I thinking too much of myself to be in this field? And I would say that's been its own journey in itself, and figuring that out and navigating it, and sometimes even still navigating it and overcoming some of these like stories that we tell ourselves.
Well, I think it's so inspiring and encouraging what you're doing. And I appreciate you sharing that. I was going to ask if there were any struggles that you encountered, but I think like when we are real and share our struggles, that normalizes things for the next generation and it gives them that much more of a confidence. Say, like, okay, I'm not alone and I can do this. So, as we wrap up, I always like to ask my guests if they would share any encouragement or advice for the next generation.
Yeah, I would say the two things I would encourage is one is investing in yourself. And so whether that means therapy, whether that means coaching, whatever that means to you, invest in yourself because you are the one person you can count on every day to get you from point A to point B. And sometimes we need help to support us with our own conversations that we have in our head that can sometimes be limiting and stopping us. The second advice I would have is to be your own unapologetic self. And for many years, I tried to be someone that I'm not, and tried to be the person that someone would accept. Even when I graduated and opened my own office, I tried to dress more professional and always wore my glasses because I felt like people would see me as smarter and older. And now I kind of dressed up today, but I usually wear Avengers, Flash, lucha libre t-shirts to the office because I want kids to know that, hey, we're cool. I'm on your team. I love all these things just like you do, but being your own apologetic self and who you are, and people are going to love you for who you are and the individual that you are. And if they don't, that's okay, because that's not who you want to work with anyways, who aren't going to empower you to be the best person and best individual that you are. We even trade Pokemon cards in our office because it's so much fun. Like, have fun in whatever world that you do. And keep pushing forward. And I love encouraging and mentoring other young individuals because it's like, hey, like I was you. I want you to learn from my mistakes so that you don't encounter them. So like you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's get you here and then you find that path to move forward.
That is so amazing. Oh, my son is going to be so excited if he sees Pokemon cards. My daughter too. They both collect.
Oh,
Um, that thank you so much. Everything that you shared is so informative, so encouraging. So I really appreciate your time, and I'm gonna have to schedule an appointment to get some scans for my kids because
yeah.
I think that's the next step. I feel like we always like try and get like, okay, we got this covered. Okay, now what else can we do to add on to support them?
Yeah, and we're always on this continuum of health. And so we're never perfect. We're always like in that continuum back and forth and just adding things little by little to get us to a better path. And if it's okay with you, I wanted to share an offer for your listeners in our office. So that first visit that we talked about earlier in the podcast, it's normally about 45-minute appointment. And so we get pretty invested in what's happening in your kiddo's life. Normally it's $150 to do all the scans, the history, and go through all that. However, for any of our listeners that mentioned Karina Mora, when you call to schedule an appointment, we'll do that whole entire visit for only $47. But you must mention that you heard us on the podcast. And if you are not local to the area and would like to find a pediatric family chiropractor in your area, send us an email at info@discoverbrightfutures.com, and we'll find someone that's in your zip code to help support you and your family with what's going on.
Wow, thank you so much. Yes, that's going to be so beneficial. I appreciate that offer. And I really hope my listeners take you up on that because that is a great offer. Can you also share your website and then Instagram so people can learn more about you and follow?
Yep. Our website is discoverbrightfutures.com and our Instagram is at Discover Bright Futures.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and I appreciate this conversation. I'm so excited for my listeners to hear it.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to connecting.
Yes, we'll see each other soon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Isn't Dr. Angie amazing? I'm so glad that she pursued this career and is an advocate for our youngest kids. I mean, who knew that you can get an adjustment just hours of being born? I know I didn't, and I wish that I had known to start getting my kids adjusted at a younger age. My kids are actually having their first visit today, the day the episode comes out. So you need to take her up on her generous offer for that first visit. Like, en serio, give her office a call or reach out to her if you're not local. But I hope that you're inspired and encouraged to think about seeing a chiropractor as an option for your family's wellness care. Okay, amigos, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share, take a screenshot to post on Instagram at Elevating La Cultura, or send me a DM. You can also comment on our YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So go on. Enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week.